what's up guys, it's Kieran. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I am a newly qualified doctor. I literally just finished my medical degree from Cardiff Uni, and over the years I've had a ton of questions about medical school, how to apply, how to prepare for interviews, stuff about Cardiff Uni itself, and I've always had a little bit of imposter syndrome. In the back of my head I've always been asking myself, what really gives me the right to be answering these questions? But now that I've actually finished my degree and I am a doctor, I feel more than qualified to give some advice, answer your questions, and I figured I would collate all of the information into one big video. So I don't want this introduction to be too long because I know it's going to be a pretty hefty video. I just wanted to say, to make everything easier for everybody, I'm going to have timestamps throughout the videos, so they're just going to mark off different sections and you can just click to wherever you need to go to have your specific questions answered. So having said that, let's just get right on into the video. I'm going to start off with just briefly going through my background so you know exactly what I went through to get to where I am today. So I'm pretty sure I always knew I wanted to do medicine. From the age of about 8 I knew that I wanted to do surgery, and that made everything so much easier because I knew exactly what I wanted to do and I understood how much hard work I needed to put in to get the grades that I needed to then apply to medical school. And I'm really grateful that I knew that about myself. I had this self-awareness of what I wanted to do, and I knew that I needed to have the determination, the motivation, the discipline to just get shit done basically. So in terms of GCSEs, I did 11, I got 8 A stars, 2 A's and a B, and then I did the typical 3 A levels, biology, chemistry and maths, and I got 3 A's. I also did music at AS level, which was a personal choice. I loved music and I really wanted to challenge myself. It was literally my hardest A level subject. I struggled a lot and I got 2 marks off an A, which I'm still sour about to this day, but I decided to drop it because it really had no contribution to doing medicine itself. I was literally just doing it to challenge myself, and I decided to prioritise getting the grades I needed in the subjects I needed, so I dropped it after AS. But if you are going through the application process at the moment, you know that you actually apply to the unis you want to go to before you even do your A-levels or get your grades, which makes everything so overwhelming and so anxiety driven. But anyway, I applied to Nottingham, Cardiff, obviously, Bristol and Birmingham, and with medicine you can apply to 4 medical schools and then you have a 5th option which you can choose as a backup. So I applied to Bristol again for biomedical sciences, and my plan was, if I didn't get into medicine, I was going to do biomed, try and bridge over after the first year of biomed, but if that failed I was going to do 3 years of biomed and then reapply to medicine as a postgrad, which obviously would have sucked. It would have added so many years onto my training, but I was really determined to do medicine and I was prepared to do whatever it takes. That's pretty much my background. I did want to just go a bit more into depth as to why I chose the unis I did. So firstly, my top 2 were actually Nottingham and Cardiff, mainly because they both offered cadaveric dissection, and at the time I was really interested in surgery. I wanted to learn anatomy in the best, most beneficial way, and to me cadaveric dissection was the way to go. So those were my top 2. I genuinely applied to Bristol not because I loved the look of the course. In fact, I didn't even do that much research into the course. I literally applied because I loved the area. I got such a good vibe in the city of Bristol and I wanted to live there, and I really would not recommend applying somewhere just because of that reason. Do your research into the course, see if it's going to fit you and work to your strengths, and if it's not, don't apply. It's so not worth it. But that's also the reason that I applied to Bristol again with my backup of biomed, because I just loved the place. And then I applied to Birmingham not because I wanted to, but because I didn't really have a 4th medical school I wanted to apply to, and my dad was quite keen for me to apply to Birmingham, and I figured I may as well because I don't have another option. I've already applied to my top 3 and Birmingham I just threw into the mix, which again I don't recommend, but because I didn't really have another option I didn't really care because I wasn't that affected if I got in or not. The other reason that I specifically really liked Nottingham was because in the application process they combined your GCSE grades with your UKCAT score and made it into one collated score, and When I did the UKCAT, I really struggled. It was not my kind of exam and I didn't do well in it. So I was looking for unis that were going to take into account my GCSE grades as well, because I did fairly well in them, and Nottingham was really perfect for that. So I would highly recommend, if you struggle with the UKCAT, go and do some research into what unis combine. I think Cardiff also looked at the GCSE grades, which is another reason that I applied there. Birmingham definitely didn't, and I don't think Bristol did either, but again, if I could go back in time, I would definitely change where I applied to, because I don't think I did it in the most logical, sensible way, but here we are. I still got into medical school, so I guess you can say I got a little bit lucky because I was not very sensible with applying, but definitely learn from my mistakes, do a lot more research than I did, and make sure that you're applying somewhere that fits you. For me, the main thing was I didn't want to do the whole 3 years of lectures where it's purely theory and then 2 years of practical where they immerse you into a clinical environment. I wanted to be in a clinical environment from day one. I wanted to be getting used to practical skills and communication skills and just patient care from day one, and Cardiff and Nottingham both offered that, especially Cardiff. They do placement once a week from first year onwards, and I'll get more into that, but basically that's what I was looking for, and I didn't really do too much other research into everything else with the course, so definitely learn from my mistakes and do more research. But like I just briefly mentioned, you have to take the UKCAT to apply to most medical schools. I'm not sure if they call it the UKCAT anymore or the UCAT, but either way, like I said, I very much struggled with that exam. There are some certain universities that also ask for the BMAT, so I think Oxbridge, Imperial and also Leeds asked for the BMAT at the time that I was applying, and I was very much interested in going to Leeds University. I loved the area, I've got family there, and I really liked the look of the course, but I really did not want to add another exam to my plate. It was just not worth it to me. I was already revising for A-levels, trying to get my grades, revising for the UKCAT, and I didn't want to add something else to my plate and overwhelm myself even more. So I decided that it would not be sensible to apply to Leeds as my only BMAT university. If I was going to apply to Leeds, then I probably would have added a couple of other BMAT universities onto my list, because otherwise I don't really know if it would be worth it, but that's something that you have to kind of weigh up yourself. So in terms of interviews, I got offered interviews for Cardiff and Nottingham, and they both offered MMI style interviews, which stands for multiple mini interviews, which is basically exactly what it says. They set up, I think, 8 to 10 stations, and you spend about 10 minutes on each station. Each one has a different topic and a different interviewer, and I really liked the idea of that, because if you mess up on one, you can just forget about it and move on to the next one, and hopefully overall throughout all of the interviews you do, you will have done fairly well. Whereas the other type of interview that a lot of unis offer are panel interviews, which is like half an hour with 3 or 4 of the same interviewers in front of you. And if you find that you're a bit socially awkward, or you're extremely nervous, or you don't really know what to talk about or how to answer a certain question, that interview I think is so much harder, because you don't get to leave, you don't get to move on, you are just stuck there for half an hour. So I'm really glad none of my unis did those kinds of interviews. So in terms of preparing for interviews, I'm just going to talk about MMIs because that's what I've got experience in. Firstly, have a few key questions answered in your head already. They're always going to ask you, why do you want to do medicine? Why do you want to do medicine at that university? And sometimes they'll ask you what makes you think that you'll be a good doctor. So just have answers to those 3 questions in your head memorized, because for me it was the first thing I was asked at both my interviews. Right at the beginning, you're so nervous that sometimes your brain will just freeze. So if that's the first question they're going to ask you, if you've got something all ready to go to just reel off, it makes it so much easier. The other thing that they always include in MMIs is an ethics station. So learn your 4 pillars of medical ethics and use that as the basis for your answer every single time. They are never going to expect a yes or no answer. They're never going to expect you to come to a conclusion, because the ethics questions are always very controversial. But just learn your 4 pillars of ethics. When they ask you the question, go through the pros and the cons. Don't come to a conclusion. Just basically have a debate against yourself with whatever topic they've given you. And when it comes to topics, have some points in your head for the general topics that are probably going to come up. So for me, I had points in my head for abortion, euthanasia and IVF. Those are like the controversial things that they would always ask about and ask your thoughts on. And at the end of the day, when they say, what are your thoughts on this, they do not mean, what are your thoughts on this? If you are completely against euthanasia, don't just go through all of the cons. Go through the pros and the cons, weigh them up, debate it against yourself, and don't come to a conclusion. Don't say that you disagree with it or that you agree with it. Just do it as a debate, because they do not mean, what are your thoughts on it? They really just want you to think through the pros and cons, and they want you to basically say that it's an impossible decision and it's really, really difficult. And as a doctor, you'd definitely be including other team members, you'd be discussing with your seniors, and you'd be weighing up the pros and cons, which is exactly what they want you to talk about, if that makes sense. So have a few sort of answers ready to go with those topics as well. And I think that's really all you can do in terms of preparing for interviews. Obviously, if you're very socially anxious, I would just put yourself out there and practice talking to people and really getting your communication skills on point. They really appreciate you making eye contact. Don't be looking around the room or looking at the floor or looking at your feet, because that shows that you're not very confident. You really just need to fake it till you make it with the confidence. If you're not feeling it, pretend you are. Another station that I had with both of my interviews, which I'm not sure if they do in all medical schools, was a math station, and you weren't allowed a calculator. So if you struggle with mental maths, practice, do the basics, because you have like 10 minutes to answer a certain number of questions. And I remember I was quite good at mental maths at the time and I was prepared for a math station, but the amount of questions they ask you probably will struggle anyway. And there was another station that Cardiff did that I don't think Nottingham did, but I'm not sure if it was niche to Cardiff. But they gave you like a diagnosing station, and they basically gave you pictures of a patient, and they wanted you to write a paragraph about what you see and what you think the diagnosis is. To be honest, it was very intense for somebody who wasn't even a medical student yet. I was literally just applying to medicine, and I was stressed out in my head thinking, why do they expect me to know this when I haven't even gone to medical school yet? But I think the key was to spend most of the time just describing what you see, and then if you think of a diagnosis, just put it at the end. So for me, the pictures had a very, very large, like tall man with like a protruding really big chin and a really big forehead. For some reason I knew that these were signs of a pituitary tumour. I'm not sure why. I think my mum had told me in the past, but I basically did the best I could with describing what I could see, and at the end I put a differential diagnosis could be a pituitary tumour. Didn't really know if I was correct. Still don't really know if I was correct. It's not like they give you feedback at the end, but I got an offer from Cardiff and that was the uni that asked for this station, so I'm assuming I got it correct. Who really knows? But that's pretty much all the advice I have when it comes to interviews. Just do the best you can and pretend that you're confident even if you're not, because also when you enter your interview, for me anyway, I had to wait around for both of mine, and they just put you in a little waiting room with all the other students that are taking the interview, and that makes it so much worse. I remember somebody started speaking to me and they were basically just bragging about how they were better than me and how I should be really nervous, and I was like, well, firstly, that's a dickhead move, like that's not very nice, we're all nervous here, calm down. But then there were other people that I tried to chat to just in a nice way because we were sat there for so long, and they just blatantly ignored me. So I think the moral of the story is do what you need to do to prepare mentally for that interview in that situation. If you're the type of person that wants to talk to people and get comfort out of it, you can try, but they might be the person that wants to be sat in silence. If you want to be sat in silence and people are trying to talk to you, I mean, do what you need to do. Just ignore them or tell them, actually, I really just want to sit in silence right now. Basically, do what you need to do to feel the best, most prepared, most confident you possibly can. And even if you are the most prepared ever, you still won't feel prepared. So, like I said, fake it till you make it. So the next thing I want to talk about is writing your personal statement, and this is probably like the second most important part of the application process, the first being getting your actual grades for your A-levels, but your personal statement is what they're going to read and decide whether you deserve to be interviewed or not. So it's very important in getting you through to the next step of the application process. And I was given a lot of advice from my school about how to write it and what to write in it, so I'm just going to relay that advice to you because that's what worked for me, although I'm unsure if things have changed and they ask for different things now, but this is what worked for me. So first things first, you want to start off your personal statement with one sentence that's going to capture the attention of your audience. This will never not be cringy. My first one was literally, my diagnosis of celiac disease was life-changing, and it's the cringiest thing I've ever written, but it captured their attention. And going off of that, your first few sentences should be something about what interested you in medicine in the first place. So my whole situation was my first endoscopy to diagnose my celiac disease was a traumatic experience, but there was one nice healthcare worker there who literally wiped my tears, treated me like a human being rather than a patient who has no feelings. And I wrote about how I want to be that kind of doctor. I want to be the person who cares holistically about the patient as a person rather than as just a slab of meat in front of me, basically. So that was my first paragraph. Then the rest of it you want to split into 75% and 25%. The first 75% should be all about your work experience, and they advised us to have 8 weeks of work experience in the bag, and I had this easily done because I started when I was like 14 years old, which is why I said it's really helpful that I knew so early on that I wanted to do medicine so that I could bag in all of that work experience. So I had a week with a surgeon, a week on a medical ward, a week with a GP, a week with a dentist, a week with an orthodontist. I had about 2 or 3 years of volunteering in a care home already done. And what else? I had a few other things, but the main advice I was given was to get time in a hospital, time with a GP, time with the elderly, if possible time with children, and also if possible time with disabled people. And on top of that, one of your work experiences should be volunteering for a long period of time because it shows that you're kind-hearted and you care, and because it's a prolonged period of time, it shows that you've got commitment rather than just doing a week here and there. So going off that, you want to write about what work experience you did and what you learned from it. And then in the last 25% of your personal statement, you want to write about your extracurriculars and what that taught you. So again, it's going to sound really cringy, but I played netball at a high level, I think regional level, so that taught me teamwork. I was a team captain, so that taught me leadership. I also umpired, which taught me discipline and how to talk to others in a polite manner and communication skills. I played piano, which gave me dexterity. You want to basically list off all of these skills that you have gained from doing these extracurricular activities that would make you a good doctor. And it's, like I said, very cheesy, but you want good communication skills, good teamwork is really important. I threw in dexterity because I was interested in surgery, but to be honest, you don't qualify and like specialise to be a surgeon until years and years after your training in medical school, so I'm not really sure how important that is. You want to talk about communication skills, discipline, leadership. I always throw in Duke of Edinburgh if you've done it because that teaches you a lot. But those are basically the things you want to talk about. Your personal statement is going to be so cringy, but you just have to get through it. You just have to write it and ignore the fact that you kind of want to puke when you read it. And I think I had about 27 drafts of my personal statement, so don't worry if you don't get it on the first try, but have somebody that you go to that reads it every time. I had like 10-15 people that read it for me at the beginning, and as it was getting better and better and better, I had less and less people reading it, and by the end I think I just had my brother reading it and then some of my family members who are doctors reading it because obviously they've been through the process. So that's really all the advice I can give you on writing your personal statement. It really just takes perseverance because it's not exactly the most fun thing to write, but you really just want to sell yourself. You're going to sound really conceited and self-absorbed, but that's kind of what you got to do. Okay, so the last thing that I want to talk about is Cardiff Uni itself. So I'm going to give a brief rundown of what we did year by year just so that you have an understanding of what the course is like. So in first year, the first 3 months, so the first term is dedicated to PCS, which was Platform for Clinical Sciences, I believe. And the way that I describe this to everybody is it was basically A-level human biology stuffed into 3 months with 10 times the amount of detail and depth that you needed for A-level. It was very intense. It was basically 9 to 5s every day with tutorials, lectures, and this is also when we did anatomy. So like I mentioned before, we did cadaveric dissection, and we had like 1 3-hour session every week, I believe, and it was a lot of self-directed learning when it came to anatomy. You had to do your own research into whatever body part you were dissecting that week, and then it was very much team-led, like you were in a team or a group of students and you just kind of figure out what you're dissecting yourself. It was very minimal supervision in my opinion, and a lot of people have said that they wish we did anatomy much later in the course because we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know what we were looking at or what we were looking for or what we were supposed to do to prepare, really. And anatomy is a really difficult one to prepare because there are anatomy textbooks which are in so much detail and so complicated, and you just don't need to know that much depth in first year. But then there are videos and you never know how into depth you're supposed to go, and there wasn't a lot of guidance, so that was quite difficult. But I mean, we got through it, and cadaveric dissection was a really good experience, and I stand by that. I really enjoyed it. And then for the rest of first year and into second year, we had case-based learning. So we met 1 to 2 times a week in a group of students with one supervisor, and we would basically discuss a case and then come up with learning objectives, go away, research those learning objectives, come back, discuss them with the group again. Like I said before, it's a lot of self-directed learning. It's a lot of doing your own research, then discussing it, figuring out what else you need to know, going back, doing more research, discussing again, and it's a cycle in that kind of way. And again, I wish we had a little bit more guidance on this. I like the fact that they use the learning objectives based around a case. It makes it a lot more tangible with the fact that that's what you're going to be doing as a job. For example, when we learned about the cardiovascular system, we had a case on heart failure and also a case on, I think it was a heart attack. I'm not really sure, I can't really remember, but the whole point was you then went through the anatomy of the cardiovascular system, the physiology, and then you went more into depth on myocardial infarctions, heart failure, all of that kind of stuff. So by the end of it, you were supposed to have a really good grasp on that condition and the system behind it, but because there was very little guidance on what you were really supposed to know and what you were supposed to do to learn those things, I think it was very difficult to have actually completed the learning objectives, if that makes sense. Like, I didn't come out of my heart failure case thinking that I knew all about the cardiovascular system or about heart failure, and that knowledge came over the next sort of 2, 3, 4 years, to be honest. I think I'm only just confident in knowing about all of those kinds of things now, and I understand that that's the point. You're not supposed to know it all in first year, but it was very difficult to feel like you had very little support when it came to your learning, and I want to put that out there right now. If there's anything that you want to take away from this video, it's this. If you feel that you need support with your learning, you need to be guided through things, you need to be taught properly, Cardiff Uni is not the place for you. It's very much self-directed learning. You do your own research. Whatever you put into it, you get out of it. So if you're feeling lazy or not motivated, you're not going to get as much out of it as those people that are doing work every single night to figure out what they need to know and how they are going to learn about it, if that makes sense. So that was pretty much the first 2 years. The other thing that we had to do was weekly placement. So once a week we would go to a GP who was expecting us. They would usually run through a slideshow or something, do a quick teaching, and then we'd be sent on a home visit to patients that were expecting us and were okay to talk to students about whatever medical conditions they had. And most of the time it would end up just being like a quick chat. It wasn't really even history taking, but it did improve our conversation skills and communication skills. But when I applied to Cardiff, they really advertised the fact that they started placement early, and that was a huge factor that drew me in at the time. And when I realised that it was literally just 1 day a week at a GP that wasn't really placement, it was a little bit disappointing. But I suppose it was early exposure to patients and things like that. It just wasn't exactly what I was expecting, so definitely be aware of that. Our proper placement started in 3rd year, and this is when I really started to feel like I was making a difference, feeling minorly useful, not very useful, especially in my first placement. But third year they do hospital front door, which is basically like A&E, MAU, like the acute side of medicine, and we also did chronic disease, so you could have been put anywhere basically, stroke wards, that kind of thing. It was a good experience in third year of just like a broad sense of medicine. Obviously you do feel a bit lost and it does take a while to get used to placement, but it was definitely more enjoyable than the first 2 years where you weren't really getting that much exposure to patients and clinical environments. Fourth year and fifth year were definitely my favourite in terms of placement, because you are definitely in a more experienced standpoint and you know a little bit more about what you're doing, and you definitely have more confidence, especially in fifth year. I absolutely loved this year of placement because I was basically treated like a junior doctor. I was doing a lot of the F1's jobs, and it definitely helped me to feel more ready for my job coming up. That's definitely a pro of Cardiff University, is they do prepare you for your job very well. In fifth year, the placement is literally you are given your own F1 to shadow. You do all the jobs that they do. If you've got a good F1 that likes teaching, they'll take you through a lot more in depth, and I really enjoyed that. So that was pretty much the rundown of first year to fifth year. In terms of exams, from second year onwards, we had progress tests. All 4 years were sitting the same exam, and the way that they mark it is you have an adjusted score. So the pass mark is always 50%, but in second year, your score will go up because you know less than fifth years, if that makes sense. It was really hard for me to get my head around. The progress test basically tests you on everything you're supposed to have learned in 5 years, and obviously as a second year doing that, you're not going to have learned half the things that you're expected to have learned by fifth year. So definitely keep that in mind. For me, we had to pass 2 out of 3 of the progress tests each year on average. So even if you got 48 in the first one, as long as you got 52 in the second one, you've passed on average 2 of them, and then that means that you've passed the year on that sense. I really appreciated that that was the way they made it so that we could pass, because if I skimmed it on one, I knew that I could do better in the next one. But I think they are actually changing that from next year onwards, so I'm not really sure what they're changing it to. I know it's probably going to be a bit harder, but that is just what I had. And then in terms of practical exams, we had our ISKIs or OSKIs, whatever you call them, in second year and in fourth year. So in second year, we obviously had to pass them to pass second year, but they weren't our finals. So we had like 8 stations, we practiced our history taking, our examinations. They asked like a formative question at the end, so they tried to base it off what the fourth year ones would be like, so you have to be able to answer a question correctly, but they didn't make it summative, so it didn't count. So if we didn't know the answer to the question second year, it was fine. We knew what we were aiming for in fourth year. It was a good sort of almost mock situation, but if we didn't know at the time, that wouldn't mean that we failed. It was mainly just testing our examination and communication skills. In terms of the fourth year ISKIs, I'm really happy that they put the finals in fourth year. It made fifth year so much more enjoyable because we'd already basically passed. There are only a few exams that you have to pass in fifth year, including the prescribing exam, which Cardiff say you have to pass your fifth year, although a lot of unis don't do that. Usually you have to pass your PSA before the end of your F1 year. So for Cardiff it's just a bit different, you have to pass it in fifth year, but I prefer that because it takes the pressure off of your first year as a junior doctor. You don't have to do anything for that exam because you've already done it. We also have to do the SJT, which to be honest there's not a lot you can do to prep for it. I've made a whole other video on resources that I recommend you use in medical school, so check that out if you want any advice on how to revise for anything. But what I'm saying for SJT, it's very much luck of the draw and I wouldn't worry about it too much in my opinion. But yeah, that's pretty much a rundown of year 1 to 5 in summary. One of the questions I get a lot is what's the hardest year, and to be honest, each year comes with its own struggles. I think first year was really difficult because it takes a toll on your mental health. It's so intense and it's such a big jump from A levels to uni that you can suffer mentally. So it's all about finding a balance. I know it's a lot of self-directed learning, but you also need to make sure you're having a social life, making friends, because it is your first year and that's the time to make friends and become like a group of people who know each other rather than strangers who are just studying in the library all the time. So that was hard in that sense. Fourth year was hard because of the finals. I think I would say 5th year is the easiest, if that helps, because it's just a lot more enjoyable and you're a lot more confident and you know what you're doing a lot more, and all of your foundation knowledge is in there, so you worry less about knowing things, if that makes sense. But yeah, overall I really enjoyed Cardiff. I met a lot of different people, I learned a lot about myself, and I went through a whole mental health journey, which was probably to do with moving from my hometown to Cardiff and also going from A-level to uni. Like I said, it's a huge jump, it's a massive change, and be aware that if you think it's going to affect your mental health, don't let that scare you, but make sure that you've got a support system in place. Make sure the uni knows, because they will support you, and just go from there. Take it day by day, because otherwise you can get so overwhelmed. It is a very enjoyable course if you let yourself enjoy it. There's a lot of hard work in it, but you can do it. If you want to do it, you can do it, and it will all be worth it. I'm going to end this video off here. I hope that answered some of your questions. If you have any other ones, just leave them in the comments and I will get to them. But good luck if you're applying to medicine. It is really fun. I hope I didn't scare you away from it. I swear, I really love it, and I'm really excited for this next chapter of my life to become a doctor and put all of those things that I've learned into good practice. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!